Hey guys, tonight we're embarking on a journey not of exotic silks and glittering spices, but into the truly unsettling realm of ancient medicine along the fabled Silk Road. Forget your modern hospitals, sterile operating rooms, and pharmaceutical marvels. You're about to discover that when sickness struck a traveler on this vast, ancient network, the cures available were often far more disturbing than the ailments themselves. A terrifying gamble where survival was often a miracle. Not a guarantee, frankly. You probably wouldn't survive the first day on the road without needing a cure that would make you wish you just stayed home. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me, where in the world are you tuning in from, and what time is it for you right now? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself suddenly standing in a bustling caravanserai, a roadside inn somewhere in Central Asia, perhaps around the 2nd century CE. The air is thick with the smell of camel dung, spices, and the sweat of weary travelers. You are a merchant far from home, and your body, accustomed to the comforts of your distant city, is now exposed to the myriad perils of the road. And almost immediately, the unseen threats begin to emerge. The Silk Road was not just a conduit for goods, it was a superhighway for diseases. Imagine traveling thousands of miles across diverse climates, through crowded towns, and alongside people from countless different cultures, each carrying their own unique pathogens. You were constantly exposed to new bacteria, viruses, and parasites for which your body had no natural immunity. This was a biological free-for-all, making illness an almost inevitable companion on your journey. Common ailments that we barely think about today could become life-threatening emergencies. A simple cold could escalate into fatal pneumonia in the harsh desert nights. A bout of dysentery from contaminated water could lead to severe dehydration and death. Malaria, carried by mosquitoes in fertile oases, was a constant threat. And then there were the injuries: a sprained ankle from a treacherous mountain pass, a broken bone from a fall off a camel, or a deep cut from a bandit attack. Far from home, far from any familiar healer, every minor ailment became a potential death sentence. It truly sucked to get a common cold in the middle of nowhere. The sheer diversity of environments along the Silk Road also brought unique health challenges. One day you might be crossing scorching deserts, risking heat stroke and severe dehydration. The next, you might be traversing freezing mountain passes, vulnerable to frostbite and hypothermia. These extreme conditions constantly stressed your body, weakening your immune system and making you more susceptible to whatever illnesses were circulating. And let's not forget the food and water. While trading exotic goods, your own provisions would be basic and often monotonous. Water sources along the route were frequently unreliable and contaminated, forcing you to drink suspect water or limited, brackish alternatives. Food, often dried or preserved, could spoil, leading to severe gastrointestinal distress. Imagine suffering from agonizing stomach cramps and violent vomiting, miles from any settlement, with only rudimentary medical knowledge at your disposal. One common misconception is that ancient people had simple, robust immune systems better suited for their environment. In reality, they were constantly battling a wide array of pathogens, and their lifespans were significantly shorter due to the prevalence of infectious diseases. The Silk Road, by bringing together diverse populations, exacerbated this problem, acting as a historical incubator for new and deadly epidemics, including, famously, the Black Death, though that would come much later. Historians still meticulously trace the origins and spread of ancient diseases by analyzing trade routes and archaeological evidence of skeletal remains, confirming the devastating impact of such interconnectedness. Furthermore, the lack of established medical infrastructure was terrifying. There were no hospitals, no standardized medical training, and no universal access to qualified practitioners. If you fell ill in a remote caravanserai, your only hope might be a local folk healer whose practices and remedies could be wildly different from anything you knew and perhaps dangerously ineffective. You were putting your life in the hands of strangers, guided by beliefs and traditions completely foreign to your own. So, your journey along the ancient Silk Road was a perilous dance with disease and injury. Every mile brought new risks, every oasis a potential threat, and every passing caravan a chance encounter with an unknown pathogen, this constant, pervasive threat of sickness. Far from any familiar comfort or effective cure, was the brutal reality that defined your experience, setting the stage for the truly disturbing medical cures you might encounter. Having fallen ill or suffered an injury on the vast, unforgiving expanse of the Silk Road, your desperate search for healing would lead you into the bewildering and often terrifying world of local healers. Forget a single, standardized medical system. You would encounter a dizzying array of traditional practices, some rooted in centuries of empirical observation, others in pure superstition, all of them capable of offering disturbing remedies that were as much a test of your courage as they were a hope for cure. Imagine stumbling into a small village along the route, racked by fever and pain. The local healer, often a shaman, a village elder, or a practitioner of traditional medicine like Chinese or Ayurvedic medicine, depending on your location, would greet you. Their approach to illness would be fundamentally different from any modern understanding. They wouldn't focus on germs or viruses. Instead, they might attribute your sickness to an imbalance of vital energies, the displeasure of spirits, or an unfavorable alignment of the stars. It truly sucked to have your fever blamed on bad vibes. The methods they employed could be astonishingly varied and, to your modern sensibilities, deeply unsettling. You might find yourself subjected to acupuncture, where fine needles are inserted into specific points on your body to manipulate the flow of Cha life energy. While modern studies show some efficacy for pain relief, the idea of having needles stuck into you in a dusty tent might not inspire immediate confidence. Or perhaps you would encounter cupping, where heated cups are applied to your skin to create a vacuum, drawing out bad humors or stagnant blood. This would leave large, circular bruises on your body, a visible sign of the cure at work. Then there's moxibustion, involving burning dried mugwort on or near your skin, creating intense heat to stimulate acupuncture points. The smell of burning herbs, coupled with the risk of burns, would be distinct and unsettling. If your illness was deemed spiritual, the cure might involve exorcism or shamanic rituals. Imagine a healer chanting, drumming, or entering a trance state to communicate with spirits, attempting to appease them or drive out malevolent entities believed to be causing your sickness. You might be asked to consume bizarre concoctions of herbs, animal parts, or even hallucinogenic plants as part of the ritual. This would be a terrifying blend of medicine and mysticism, blurring the lines between healing and spiritual warfare. It really sucked to have a spirit fight happening inside your body. Some cultures practice trepanation, drilling holes into the skull to relieve pressure, cure headaches, or release evil spirits. While occasionally successful, this invasive procedure, performed without proper hygiene or anesthesia, carried an immense risk of infection, brain damage, or death. Imagine a healer approaching you with a drill, convinced they need to cut into your skull to save you. One common misconception is that all ancient traditional medicine was primitive and ineffective. While much of it lacked scientific basis as we understand it, many traditional systems like Chinese medicine or Ayurvedic medicine possessed extensive pharmacopoeias of herbal remedies, and their practitioners had deep empirical knowledge of the human body and the effects of certain plants. Some of these herbal remedies, when isolated and studied by modern science, have indeed been found to contain active pharmaceutical compounds. Historians still meticulously research the ancient medical texts and archaeological findings to discern the true efficacy and scientific basis of various traditional cures, often finding a surprising blend of effective treatments and ineffective superstitions. Furthermore, the lack of language barriers would add another layer of terror to your experience. You might struggle to communicate your symptoms, relying on gestures or rudimentary interpreters, leading to misunderstandings about your ailment and the prescribed remedy. The healer might not understand your cultural background, leading to treatments that seemed utterly alien or even barbaric. The Silk Road was also a conduit for the exchange of medical knowledge. As you traveled, you might find ideas from Persian, Indian, Chinese, and Greek medicine intermingling. A healer in one oasis might employ techniques learned from a traveling physician from a distant land. This cross-cultural exchange, while enriching, also meant a dizzying array of beliefs and methods, making it hard to discern truly effective treatments from dangerous quackery. So, when sickness struck you on the ancient Silk Road, your desperate search for a cure would lead you to local healers whose practices were a bewildering blend of empirical knowledge, spiritual belief, and often terrifying invasiveness. These disturbing remedies, performed in unsanitary conditions, were a testament to the sheer desperation of ancient travelers, and a stark reminder that in a world without modern medicine, every cure was a gamble with your very life. Even if you managed to survive the bizarre and often invasive procedures of the local healers, the ingredients they employed in their cures could be even more unsettling. On the ancient Silk Road, your desperate search for healing might lead you to consume gruesome and often ineffective animal parts, a disturbing testament to the desperate lengths people would go for a glimmer of hope. Imagine suffering from a persistent cough or a debilitating fever. A local healer might prescribe a remedy that involves parts of animals you'd never consider for medicine today. You might be told to ingest powdered snakeskin, believed to aid in regeneration or treat skin ailments, or perhaps a concoction made from bear bile, a highly prized and incredibly expensive ingredient, thought to cure everything from indigestion to fevers. The taste would be bitter, pungent, and utterly revolting, but you would force it down, hoping it offered relief. It truly sucked to eat gross animal parts for medicine. The use of animal parts stemmed from a combination of empirical observation. Some animal products do contain active compounds, though often unknown to the ancients. Sympathetic magic believing that consuming a strong animal part would transfer its strength, and sheer desperation. You might encounter remedies involving powdered rhinoceros horn, believed to reduce fever and act as an aphrodisiac. Despite no scientific basis, this led to devastating poaching of rhinoceros across Asia. Tiger bones used in traditional Chinese medicine for joint pain and weakness, leading to the endangerment of tigers. Imagine grinding the bones of a majestic predator into a fine powder and swallowing it. The thought alone is chilling. Dried lizard or gecko, often used for various skin conditions or general weakness, sometimes consumed whole or in powdered form. Bezoar stones. These calcified masses found in the digestive systems of certain animals like goats were believed to have antitoxic properties and were highly prized as antidotes to poison. They were incredibly rare and expensive, and their efficacy was entirely based on superstition. It really sucked to gamble your life on a stomach stone. Beyond the exotic and expensive, even mundane animal parts found their way into cures. You might be given a poultice made from animal dung, believing its warmth or unknown properties could draw out illness. While some cultures did use certain animal products for their antiseptic qualities, e.g., honey, raw dung carried immense risks of bacterial infection. The preparation of these remedies was often as disturbing as the ingredients themselves. Animals might be killed specifically for their medicinal parts, their organs dried, bones ground, or fluids extracted, often without any understanding of hygiene or preservation, increasing the risk of contamination. Imagine the stench of a traditional medicine shop filled with dried animal organs, herbs, and unknown concoctions. A truly sensory assault. One common misconception is that these animal parts were consistently effective. While some may have provided temporary placebo effects or contained trace amounts of compounds that could have had an impact, the vast majority were ineffective and, in many cases, potentially harmful, introducing parasites or toxins into the body. The demand for these rare animal products, however, led to extensive trade along the Silk Road, further driving the hunting and endangerment of various species. Historians still meticulously study ancient medical texts from different Silk Road cultures to identify the pharmacological properties of the described animal products, often finding a vast gap between claimed efficacy and scientific reality. Furthermore, the very act of consuming these gruesome remedies was a psychological test. Your desperation to survive would override your natural aversion to eating dried animal genitalia. Powdered bones, or bitter bile. This act of forced consumption, often in unsanitary conditions, was a constant reminder of the precariousness of life on the Silk Road and the crude state of ancient medicine. So, when illness struck you on the ancient Silk Road, your desperate search for a cure would often lead you to remedies involving gruesome animal parts. These disturbing ingredients, sourced from far-flung lands and prepared with primitive methods, were a testament to the blend of superstition, limited knowledge, and sheer desperation that defined medical practices in the ancient world. You were literally consuming the wild, hoping it would bring healing, in a practice that was profoundly disturbing. Even more unsettling than the use of animal parts in ancient medical cures along the Silk Road was the disturbing practice of incorporating human elements. When desperation for healing reached its peak, some traditional remedies ventured into the realm of the macabre, utilizing human remains, bodily fluids, or excretions, driven by beliefs in transferred power or magical properties. This made your desperate search for a cure profoundly disturbing. Imagine a healer with a grave expression prescribing a remedy that involved something from a human body. This wasn't about understanding human anatomy or physiology. It was often rooted in sympathetic magic, the belief that consuming a part of something would transfer its characteristics. For instance, consuming something from a strong or wise person might transfer their strength or wisdom. The concept of human essence being transferable was pervasive. It truly sucked when your medicine tasted like existential dread, one of the most widely documented and deeply unsettling practices was the use of mumia. This wasn't necessarily true ancient Egyptian mummy flesh, but rather any dried, preserved human remains, often stolen from tombs or even acquired from executed criminals. Mumia was believed to be a panacea, a cure-all for various ailments, from headaches and stomach aches to more serious conditions. It was typically ground into a fine powder and mixed with wine, water, or honey, then ingested. Imagine swallowing a bitter, dusty concoction made from human flesh, believing it would heal you. The taste, the texture, and the chilling knowledge of its origin would be deeply unsettling. Beyond mumia, various human bodily fluids and excretions found their way into remedies. While some, like human milk, might be understandable in limited contexts, for infants, others were far more disturbing. Human blood, particularly from virgins or those believed to possess special qualities, was sometimes prescribed, often as a restorative or for certain ailments. Imagine drinking fresh human blood as part of your treatment, a practice that blurs the line between medicine and dark ritual. Even more disturbingly, human urine and feces were occasionally used, both internally and externally. While modern understanding recognizes the sterile nature of fresh urine in some contexts, and its use in ancient times for cleaning or dyeing due to ammonia content, its medicinal ingestion or topical application would carry immense risks of bacterial infection and unpleasant side effects. Ancient texts from various cultures along the Silk Road describe uses ranging from treating skin ailments to curing digestive issues. Imagine being offered a drink of urine or a poultice of human waste, desperate enough to accept it. It truly sucked to swallow human waste for your health. The belief systems behind these practices varied in some cultures. It was tied to the concept of kwai, or vital life force, where the bodily fluids or remains of a potent individual were thought to contain concentrated essence that could rejuvenate the sick. In others, it might be a desperate last resort attempt when all other remedies had failed, a willingness to try anything, no matter how repulsive, to cling to life. One common misconception is that these extreme human-based remedies were prevalent across all ancient societies while such practices existed. They were often considered extreme, controversial, or specific to certain folk traditions, not mainstream medical practice. However, the Silk Road's vastness and the desperate circumstances of travelers meant you were more likely to encounter, and perhaps consider, such desperate measures when faced with a life-threatening illness far from home. Historians still meticulously study ancient medical papyri, cuneiform tablets, and classical texts from diverse cultures to catalog and understand the specific uses and cultural justifications for human-based remedies, often finding them to be a testament to both deep-seated beliefs and sheer desperation. Furthermore, the lack of regulations or scientific oversight meant that you, the patient, had no way of knowing the true origin or safety of these human components. Were they genuinely from a pure source, or simply acquired from a grave robber? The ethics were non-existent, and your desperation made you vulnerable to dangerous and often fraudulent practices. So, when conventional remedies failed you on the ancient Silk Road, your desperate search for a cure might lead you to the unsettling world of human element cures. These disturbing remedies, incorporating mummified remains, bodily fluids, or excretions, were a chilling testament to the extreme lengths to which ancient healers and desperate patients would go in the pursuit of health. A profound and profoundly disturbing aspect of their medical landscape. Even beyond the gruesome animal and human components, your desperate quest for a cure on the ancient Silk Road could lead you to remedies made from the earth itself. Minerals, these weren't just simple clays, they were often rare, sometimes precious, and disturbingly, frequently toxic substances consumed or applied with little understanding of their true effects, making your medical gamble profoundly disturbing. Imagine a healer offering you a small, glistening shard, or a packet of colorful powder. You're told it's a powerful medicine, perhaps brought from distant lands, but what you hold might be far more dangerous than the illness itself. The use of minerals in medicine stemmed from beliefs about their inherent properties, their rarity, or simply their visual appeal, rather than any scientific understanding of their chemical composition. It truly sucked when your medicine was basically poison. One of the most common and disturbing mineral cures was lead. Yes, the same lead that can cause severe poisoning. Lead compounds, like white lead carbonate or red lead tetroxide, were used in various ancient medicines and cosmetics across different cultures. They were sometimes applied topically for skin conditions, or even ingested for internal ailments. Despite their known toxicity, imagine applying a heavy metallic paste to your skin, believing it would soothe an irritation, when it was slowly poisoning you. Then there was mercury, this shimmering. Liquid metal was known in ancient China and India, and its compounds were used in some traditional medicines for conditions like syphilis, though syphilis became widespread much later than the classical Silk Road period or skin diseases. Ingesting or applying mercury, even in small amounts, can cause severe neurological damage, kidney failure, and other horrific symptoms. Imagine a healer prescribing a silvery liquid, promising a cure, when it was slowly destroying your internal organs. It really sucked to ingest liquid metal for health. Other metallic substances found their way into remedies. Arsenic, a highly poisonous metalloid, was sometimes used in very small doses in ancient traditional medicines, often for skin ailments or as a general tonic. Despite its extreme toxicity, antimony compounds were also used, both as cosmetics like kohl and as internal medicines for various conditions. Again, with significant risks, the line between medicine and poison was incredibly thin, and often crossed unknowingly. Beyond these overtly toxic substances, other, less dangerous but equally questionable minerals were used. Gold and silver, highly prized for their rarity and beauty, were sometimes incorporated into remedies, either as flakes, powder, or dissolved in liquids if the ancient alchemists succeeded. They were believed to have purifying or life-giving properties due to their incorruptibility and preciousness. While largely harmless, their inclusion was based on superstition and economic value, not true medicinal efficacy, making them an incredibly expensive placebo. Imagine swallowing crushed gold, hoping it cured your fever. The understanding of these minerals' properties was purely empirical or based on symbolic association. They observed that some substances had powerful, immediate effects, even if those effects were poisoning, and thus attributed medicinal power to them. They had no concept of dosage, accumulation, or long-term toxicity. A cure might alleviate one symptom while causing irreversible damage to another part of the body. One common misconception is that ancient healers deliberately poisoned their patients. While some charlatans certainly existed, most traditional healers believed they were genuinely helping, operating within the limits of their knowledge and the prevailing medical theories of their time. The dangers stemmed from ignorance of complex chemistry and toxicology, not malicious intent. Historians still meticulously analyze residues in ancient medicinal vessels and reevaluate classical medical texts to understand the precise uses and potential harms of these mineral-based remedies, often using modern chemical analysis. Furthermore, the Silk Road's role as a conduit for exotic goods meant that highly potent and often dangerous minerals from distant lands could find their way into a local healer's toolkit. A substance considered safe in one region might be misused or overdosed in another, where its properties were less understood, increasing the risk for the desperate traveler seeking a cure. So, when conventional remedies failed you on the ancient Silk Road, your desperate search for healing might lead you to physicians employing mineral-based cures. These profoundly disturbing remedies, often made from toxic substances like lead, mercury, or arsenic, were a chilling testament to the dangers inherent in ancient medicine, where the line between a miraculous cure and a slow, agonizing death was often dangerously blurred. Even if you avoided the gruesome animal parts, the unsettling human elements, and the toxic minerals in your desperate search for a cure on the ancient Silk Road. Your journey would inevitably lead you to the realm of ancient surgery. This was a world of crude tools, excruciating pain, and terrifyingly high risks of infection and death, making these life-saving or often life-ending procedures profoundly disturbing. Imagine suffering from a severe injury on the road, perhaps a compound fracture from a fall, a deep wound from a bandit's blade, or an abscess that has festered beyond the help of poultices. You are brought to a local healer or a traveling physician whose expertise might be your only hope. Forget the sterile environment of a modern operating room. You'd likely be on a dirty mat on the ground, or a rough wooden table in a dim, perhaps smoky tent or a rudimentary dwelling. The air would be thick with the smell of unwashed bodies, fear, and the metallic tang of blood. It truly sucked to need surgery when it was more like a horror show. There would be no effective anesthesia. At best, you might be offered a strong dose of wine, some opium, or a handful of mandrake root, which could induce a stupor but also cause dangerous side effects. More often, you would simply be held down by several strong individuals, enduring the agonizing pain fully conscious. Imagine the terror of seeing the crude instruments, knives, saws, forceps, trepans, glinting in the dim light, knowing what was coming, and being utterly powerless to stop it. Your screams would echo, but no one would intervene. Surgical tools were basic and far from sterile. They might be made of bronze, iron, or even obsidian, often used repeatedly without proper cleaning between patients. A knife used to lance a boil might then be used to amputate a limb, directly transferring bacteria and pathogens. The concept of germ theory was unknown. They didn't understand that unseen microorganisms caused infection. They might rinse instruments in unboiled water or wipe them with dirty rags, believing that removed visible dirt was sufficient. This fundamental lack of understanding made every invasive procedure a game of Russian roulette with deadly bacteria. Common surgical procedures included amputations for severely infected or gangrenous limbs. Amputation was a common, last resort procedure to prevent the spread of infection and save a life. Imagine a limb being sawed off, bone and flesh, without anesthesia, the patient bleeding profusely, followed by cauterization with a hot iron to stop the bleeding. The shock, pain, and blood loss were often fatal. Lancing abscesses and draining pus-infected boils. Abscesses, or deep wounds, would be lanced cut open to drain the pus, while sometimes effective in relieving pressure. This opened the body to further infection if not done hygienically, setting broken bones. Fractures, especially compound ones where the bone broke through the skin, were incredibly dangerous. Bones would be roughly aligned and then set in splints made of wood, bark, or bandages. Improper alignment could lead to permanent disability or chronic pain. Trepanation. As mentioned in earlier contexts, drilling holes into the skull was practiced in various cultures along the Silk Road, believed to relieve pressure from the head injuries or expel evil spirits. This was a highly invasive procedure with a very high mortality rate due to brain damage or infection. The risk of infection was paramount. Even if the immediate surgery was successful, the patient often succumbed days or weeks later to sepsis, tetanus, or other infections. The body, already weakened by trauma, had little defense against the relentless assault of bacteria introduced during the procedure. Your very cure could be your executioner. It really sucked to survive surgery only to get a deadly infection. One common misconception is that ancient surgery was always barbaric and ineffective, while undeniably brutal by modern standards. Some ancient surgeons, particularly in highly developed traditions like those described by Sushruta in ancient India or Hippocrates in Greece, did possess remarkable anatomical knowledge gained through battlefield experience or limited dissection. They could perform complex procedures, albeit with high risks. However, their successes were often overshadowed by the countless failures due to infection and lack of pain control. Historians still meticulously study ancient surgical texts and archaeological findings of surgical tools, comparing them with skeletal evidence to understand the full scope of ancient surgical capabilities and their grim outcomes. Furthermore, post-operative care was almost non-existent. You would be left to heal in unsanitary conditions without proper sterile dressings or follow-up by trained medical staff. Your survival depended entirely on your body's inherent resilience and a stroke of immense luck. There were no antibiotics to fight the inevitable infections, no sterile bandages to protect the wound, and no pain management to ease your agonizing recovery. So, when a severe injury or illness demanded an invasive procedure on the ancient Silk Road, your desperate search for healing would lead you to the terrifying reality of ancient surgery, these profoundly disturbing cures performed with crude tools, without anesthesia, and in unsanitary conditions, were a testament to the desperate gamble for survival, where the act of being cured was often as traumatic and deadly as the ailment itself. Beyond the grim realities of crude surgery and alarming ingestibles, your desperate quest for a cure on the ancient Silk Road often led you into the ethereal realm where spiritual beliefs intertwined with medicine. Forget modern evidence-based practices. Many cures relied on prayers, charms, and rituals, offering a blend of genuine psychological comfort and outright deception, making your medical journey profoundly disturbing. Imagine falling ill in a caravan or a remote trading post, far from any established medical tradition you might know. A local spiritual healer, perhaps a shaman, a Buddhist monk, a Zoroastrian priest, or a practitioner of folk magic, would approach you. Their diagnosis wouldn't be about humors or imbalances. It would be about evil spirits, divine displeasure, curses, or an imbalance of cosmic energies. Your sickness wasn't just physical, it was a spiritual battle, and the cure involved engaging with the unseen world. It truly sucked to have your body be a battlefield for invisible forces. You might be subjected to an exorcism. Imagine a healer chanting, drumming, burning pungent herbs, and making dramatic gestures over your fevered body, attempting to drive out the malevolent entity believed to be causing your illness. The atmosphere would be intense, filled with fear and desperate hope. As you lay there, a passive participant in a spiritual drama unfolding around you, the psychological impact, whether positive if you believed and felt better, or terrifying if you were already delirious, would be immense. Amulets and charms were ubiquitous. You might be given a piece of parchment inscribed with a magical spell, a holy verse, or a sacred symbol to wear around your neck or wrist, perhaps a small pouch containing dried herbs, animal teeth, or a piece of sacred wood, believed to ward off evil or attract healing energies. These weren't just decorative, they were believed to be active, protective agents, and your faith in them was often considered part of the cure. Imagine trusting your life to a piece of string and a dried bit of animal. It really sucked to gamble your life on a trinket. Prayers, invocations, and offerings to deities or ancestors were also central to many spiritual cures. If your illness was seen as a punishment from the gods, you might be asked to make a specific offering at a temple or a sacred shrine, to repent for perceived sins, or to perform a pilgrimage. Imagine the mental torment of believing your physical suffering was a direct consequence of divine anger, and that your only hope lay in appeasing an unseen power. The concept of healing dreams or incubation was also prevalent in some traditions, particularly those influenced by ancient Greek medicine like Asclepius cults or certain Buddhist practices. You might be taken to a sacred place, like a temple, and sleep there, hoping that a deity or a spirit would visit you in your dreams, revealing the cause of your illness or providing a cure. This spiritual communion was considered a potent form of healing, blurring the lines between sleep, dream, and divine intervention. While these spiritual approaches rarely had a direct physiological effect on the pathogen causing the disease, they could have a profound placebo effect. If you genuinely believed in the power of the healer or the ritual, the psychological comfort and renewed hope could sometimes activate your body's own healing mechanisms, leading to perceived improvement. In a world without effective pharmaceuticals, sometimes hope was the best medicine they had. One common misconception is that all ancient religious healing was based on pure superstition. While much of it lacked scientific basis, some spiritual traditions also incorporated practical elements, such as recommending periods of rest, specific dietary changes, or the use of certain herbs alongside rituals. The efficacy was often a blend of psychological belief and incidental practical care. Historians still meticulously study religious texts, temple inscriptions, and archaeological findings related to healing cults to understand the complex interplay between spiritual belief, medical practice, and actual health outcomes in various ancient cultures along the Silk Road. However, the dark side of spiritual cures was the potential for deception and exploitation. Charismatic healers could prey on the desperation of the sick, demanding exorbitant fees for ineffective charms or dangerous rituals if a cure failed. It was often blamed on the patient's lack of faith or an unconfessed sin, rather than the ineffectiveness of the medicine. This could lead to immense guilt and financial ruin for the desperate. So, when conventional remedies failed you on the ancient Silk Road, your desperate search for a cure might lead you into the profound and disturbing realm where spiritual belief dictated your healing. These cures, relying on exorcisms, charms, prayers, and divine interventions, offered a desperate hope, but also carried the risks of exploitation and a terrifying psychological burden, making your struggle for health a constant, unpredictable gamble with the unseen world, even as you navigated the terrifying world of crude surgeries, bizarre ingestibles, and spiritual gambles for your health. There was one particular medical horror along the ancient Silk Road that dwarfed all others: the plague. This was not just a disease, it was an unstoppable, undiagnosable terror that swept across continents, leaving a trail of unimaginable suffering and death, making its eventual encounter on your journey profoundly disturbing. Imagine yourself as a merchant, having traversed thousands of miles, perhaps thinking you've seen the worst the Silk Road has to offer in terms of illness. You arrive in a bustling city, a major trading hub like Samarkand or Kashgar, and immediately, something feels wrong. The usual vibrant energy is replaced by a chilling quiet. People move with a slow, hesitant gait. Shop stalls are deserted. And then you see the telltale signs. The plague, most famously the Black Death in the 14th century, but earlier, waves also swept through like the plague of Justinian in the 6th century, was a true nightmare. It likely originated in Central Asia, carried by fleas on rodents, especially black rats, and then spread rapidly along the trade routes, carried by the very caravans that brought wealth and exotic goods. You, the merchant, were an unwitting vector, carrying not just silk and spices, but the seeds of death. It truly sucked to be a super spreader. The symptoms were terrifyingly swift and brutal. You would develop a sudden, intense fever, followed by chills, fatigue, and muscle aches. Then would come the characteristic buboes, swollen, tender, painful lymph nodes, typically in the armpits, groin, or neck. These buboes could grow to the size of an apple or an egg, blackening and sometimes bursting, oozing pus and blood. Imagine the agonizing pain and the grotesque swelling, a visible manifestation of the disease consuming you from within. As the disease progressed, the terror would escalate. You might develop black spots on your skin, caused by subcutaneous hemorrhages, giving the Black Death its chilling name. Vomiting, diarrhea, and intense abdominal pain would rack your body. Delirium, hallucinations, and a profound sense of despair would cloud your mind. Your body would be consumed by an internal fire, your extremities often turning black as gangrene set in. The speed of death was horrifying. Many victims succumbed within days, sometimes even hours, of the first symptoms appearing. There was no time for traditional remedies, no time for elaborate rituals. People would go to bed seemingly healthy and be dead by morning. This rapid, indiscriminate mortality left communities reeling, unable to cope with the sheer volume of the dead. It really sucked to live on borrowed time. For ancient healers, the plague was an undiagnosable terror. They had no understanding of bacteria, Yersinia pestis, fleas, or rats as vectors. They might attribute it to divine punishment, astrological alignments, poisonous miasmas in the air, or even a conspiracy by foreign enemies. Their remedies, bloodletting, purging, herbal concoctions, prayers, or burning aromatic woods, were utterly ineffective against such a virulent pathogen. Doctors and healers themselves, trying to aid the sick, were often the first to die, further deepening the despair. The breakdown of society was immediate and profound. As fear mounted, people would abandon their families, their homes, and their moral codes. The dead would lie unburied in the streets. Lawlessness would prevail. The fear of contagion was so overwhelming that the very fabric of human empathy dissolved. You would witness friends turning against friends, families abandoning their sick, and the brutal reality of sheer, desperate survival. One common historical misconception is that the plague only refers to the Black Death of the 14th century. In reality, plague caused by Yersinia pestis recurred in multiple waves throughout history, with earlier outbreaks like the plague of Justinian 6th century CE having equally devastating effects across the Roman and Byzantine empires. Also likely spread along trade routes, these earlier outbreaks, though less famous, share similar characteristics of rapid, widespread mortality and societal disruption. Historians still meticulously study these different plague waves, using genetic analysis of ancient remains to understand the evolution and spread of the Yersinia pestis bacterium across millennia. Furthermore, the Silk Road's interconnectedness, which brought immense wealth and cultural exchange, also made it the perfect conduit for such a devastating pandemic. The constant movement of people, goods, and animals across vast distances through diverse ecosystems created an ideal environment for pathogens to spread and evolve, turning a local outbreak into a global catastrophe. You, the merchant, were a silent, unwitting participant in this deadly biological exchange. So, while the daily medical horrors of the Silk Road were disturbing enough, encountering the plague was a different order of terror. It was an unstoppable, undiagnosable force that brought not just illness and death, but the complete collapse of society and the utter helplessness of ancient medicine. this ultimate. Pervasive threat made your journey along the ancient trade routes a constant dance with unseen, devastating forces, ensuring that your medical survival was nothing short of a miracle. Amidst the bewildering array of gruesome animal parts, toxic minerals, crude surgeries, and terrifying plagues, there was often a single, quiet glimmer of genuine hope along the ancient Silk Road, the nuanced knowledge of herbal remedies, while not always understood scientifically, and often mixed with superstition. The vast pharmacopoeia of plants offered perhaps your best, most consistent chance for actual relief from illness, making their discovery a rare comfort amidst the otherwise disturbing medical landscape. Imagine you've fallen ill, perhaps with a persistent fever or a painful cough, but you've avoided the extreme measures of the knife man or the desperate gambles of consuming questionable substances. Instead, you encounter a healer, perhaps a traveling herbalist, a Buddhist monk with knowledge of traditional Chinese medicine, or a wise woman from a remote oasis village who turns to the natural world for your cure. The air around them might smell of dried leaves, bitter roots, and pungent spices, a stark contrast to the metallic tang of blood or the stench of decay. It truly sucked to rely on plants, but also be grateful for them. The Silk Road, as a bridge between East and West, facilitated an unparalleled exchange of botanical knowledge. Plants from China, India, Persia, and the Mediterranean traveled along its routes, bringing with them centuries of accumulated wisdom about their medicinal properties. A healer in Central Asia might use ginger, a plant from China, for digestive ailments, or frankincense, a resin from the Middle East, for its anti-inflammatory properties. This cross-cultural diffusion of knowledge created a rich, albeit often unsystematic, understanding of plant-based cures. Many of these herbal remedies, passed down through generations, did possess genuine pharmacological properties that modern science has since identified. For instance, ephedra ma huang in Chinese medicine, used for respiratory ailments like asthma and colds, it contains ephedrine, a powerful bronchodilator and decongestant. Imagine taking a bitter tea brewed from this plant, feeling your constricted airways open, providing genuine relief from a choking cough. Willow bark, known across many ancient cultures for pain, relief, and fever reduction. It contains salicin, the precursor to aspirin. A simple decoction of willow bark could significantly alleviate the agonizing symptoms of a headache or fever. Opium poppy, while famously used for pleasure and spiritual insight, it was also a powerful analgesic, pain reliever, and sedative. For a traveler suffering from severe pain or an agonizing illness, a carefully administered dose of opium could offer profound, albeit temporary, relief from suffering, allowing the body to rest and perhaps heal. Ginger used widely for nausea, vomiting, and digestive issues. Its antiemetic properties are well documented, offering genuine comfort to a traveler suffering from motion sickness or contaminated food. Garlic recognized for its antibacterial and antiseptic properties. It was used for a wide range of ailments, from infections to respiratory issues. The preparation of these remedies was often meticulous. Herbs might be dried, ground, steeped in hot water as teas, decocted boiled for a longer period to extract compounds, or mixed with honey, wine, or oil to create poultices or ointments. While hygiene was still rudimentary, the inherent properties of many of these plants provided a degree of natural antiseptic or antimicrobial action, helping to fight off infections that would otherwise turn deadly. It really sucked that this knowledge was so rarely pure. However, the efficacy of these herbal cures was often a roll of the dice. Dosage was inexact, relying on empirical observation and tradition rather than precise measurement. The potency of wild plants could vary wildly depending on soil, climate, and time of harvest. Furthermore, effective herbs were often mixed with inert or even harmful ingredients due to superstition or mistaken beliefs. Imagine relying on a plant for your life, never truly knowing if it would help or hinder. One common misconception is that all herbal medicine was harmless because it was natural. The truth is that many powerful plants contain highly toxic compounds that, in the wrong dosage or preparation, could cause severe poisoning or death. The line between a medicinal dose and a lethal one was often very thin, and mistakes were common. For instance, belladonna or hemlock, while possessing medicinal properties, are deadly poisons in larger quantities. Historians still meticulously analyze ancient pharmacopoeias and archaeological plant remains, attempting to recreate ancient herbal remedies and test their efficacy and toxicity with modern scientific methods, often finding a mix of truly beneficial, inert, and dangerously toxic plants. Furthermore, access to specific herbs depended heavily on your location along the Silk Road. A plant common in China might be rare or unknown in Persia, forcing a healer to substitute with less effective local alternatives. This regional variation meant that the quality and effectiveness of herbal remedies could change dramatically from one oasis to the next. So, amidst the desperate gambles of ancient medicine on the Silk Road, the knowledge of herbal remedies offered a fragile, yet often genuine, glimmer of hope. While their application was often unscientific and mixed with disturbing superstitions or dangerous guesswork, these plant-based cures, passed down through millennia of trial and error, were a testament to human ingenuity and observation, providing a vital, albeit unpredictable, lifeline in a world where true healing was often a miraculous exception. You've traversed the vast, perilous expanse of the ancient Silk Road, not just as a merchant, but as a patient desperately seeking a cure. You've encountered its bewildering array of medical practices, from the gruesome and toxic to the subtly effective, as the imagined dust of the caravan routes settles and the echoes of ancient healers fade. A final, profound truth emerges. Survival when struck by illness on the Silk Road was almost always a desperate gamble, making every attempt at a cure a terrifying roll of the dice in a truly disturbing medical landscape. Consider the sheer lack of reliable information when you fell ill. You had no way of knowing the true nature of your ailment. Was it a simple fever, a bacterial infection, a parasite, or the dreaded plague? There were no diagnostic tests, no microscopes, no understanding of germ theory. This meant that every cure was a shot in the dark, based on symptoms that could be indicative of a dozen different diseases. Imagine blindly trusting a healer who was guessing as much as you were, but with your life on the line, it truly sucked to be sick and clueless. Then there was the unpredictable efficacy of the cures themselves. Some herbal remedies might offer genuine relief, but their dosage was inexact, their potency varied, and they were often mixed with inert or even harmful substances due to superstition. Animal parts were usually ineffective and often disgusting. Minerals could be outright poisonous. Surgeries were brutal, agonizing, and carried an immense risk of death from shock, blood loss, or rampant infection. Every potion swallowed, every cut endured, every ritual performed was a desperate hope, not a guaranteed solution. The risk of harm from the cure itself was a constant, terrifying possibility. You might survive the illness only to be permanently disfigured by a crude surgery, poisoned by a toxic mineral, or left with lingering health issues from a dubious herbal concoction. The line between medicine and poison was perilously thin, and many desperate travelers likely succumbed not to their initial ailment, but to the very treatment meant to save them. Imagine realizing, as you lay dying, that the very medicine you swallowed was your true killer. It really sucked when the cure was worse than the disease. The isolation and desperation compounded the gamble. Far from home, far from any familiar or trusted healers, you were at the mercy of local traditions and the kindness of strangers. Your illness meant you were vulnerable, often reliant on interpreters, and easily exploited by charlatans who preyed on the desperate. The emotional toll of facing severe illness alone, surrounded by unfamiliar customs and terrifying remedies, would be immense. Adding to the inherent misery of your situation, the cost of these cures was also a brutal gamble. Rare ingredients, skilled or supposedly skilled healers, and complex rituals could demand exorbitant fees, stripping you of your precious trade goods, perhaps even forcing you to sell off your last remaining possessions just for a chance at survival. You might bankrupt yourself for a remedy that ultimately proved useless, leaving you not just sick, but destitute. One common misconception is that ancient people had a fatalistic acceptance of illness. While they certainly believed in fate and divine will, the sheer volume of medical texts, remedies, and healing cults found along the Silk Road clearly shows a persistent, desperate, and often ingenious effort to combat disease and extend life. Their persistence in seeking cures, even the disturbing ones, highlights their profound desire to survive against overwhelming odds. Historians still actively research the psychological resilience of ancient populations in the face of widespread disease, analyzing how communities and individuals coped with the constant threat of illness and high mortality. Furthermore, the very interconnectedness of the Silk Road, while bringing diverse remedies, also meant a dizzying array of contradictory theories and practices. You might encounter a healer who believed in humoral theory, another in ki energy, and yet another in spiritual possession, all offering wildly different approaches to the same symptoms. This lack of a unified, scientifically grounded medical framework meant that every choice was a leap of faith into the unknown, a true gamble on your own body. So, your experience with illness on the ancient Silk Road was a constant, terrifying series of desperate gambles. Every fever, every wound, every ailment forced you into a world of disturbing cures where survival was never guaranteed, and often came at a profound physical, financial, and psychological cost. This pervasive uncertainty, this constant reliance on chance and unproven remedies, made the medical landscape of the ancient Silk Road profoundly, undeniably disturbing, ensuring that merely surviving was a constant miracle. You've completed your stark journey through the disturbing medical cures on the ancient Silk Road, and as the phantom taste of bitter herbs, the imagined stench of ancient poultices, and the distant echoes of the desperate prayers finally dissipate, a chilling, profound truth remains. When illness struck on that vast, ancient network, healing was a relentless, terrifying gamble, and survival was often nothing short of a miracle. Think about the overwhelming omnipresence of peril. From the moment you stepped onto the Silk Road, your body was exposed to a relentless barrage of novel diseases, extreme climates, and the constant threat of injury. Every mile brought new pathogens for which you had no immunity. Every oasis a potential source of contaminated water or unfamiliar illness. This foundational vulnerability meant that falling ill wasn't a question of if, but when. Then consider the chaotic, often terrifying, nature of the cures themselves. You navigated a medical landscape devoid of standardization, where healers practiced a bewildering array of methods. You might be offered gruesome animal parts, dangerous toxic minerals, or unsettling human elements consumed or applied with little understanding of their true effects. Surgeries were agonizing, performed with crude tools and no anesthesia, leaving you vulnerable to fatal infections. Even seemingly innocuous herbal remedies were a gamble in terms of dosage and purity, and perhaps most profoundly, the pervasive desperation and lack of understanding. Ancient healers, operating without germ theory or modern diagnostics, were often guessing, attributing illness to spiritual imbalances or miasmas. This meant that the cures were often as much a test of your faith and your willingness to endure discomfort as they were about actual medicinal efficacy. You were forced to gamble your life, your meager resources, and your sanity on practices that could easily kill you, all driven by a desperate desire to cling to life. Ultimately, the story of medical cures on the ancient Silk Road is a powerful testament to human resilience and ingenuity in the face of overwhelming odds. It reveals how ancient peoples, despite their limitations, tirelessly sought ways to combat disease, but it is also a chilling narrative of what happens when advanced medical science is absent, when superstition holds sway, and when every attempt at healing is a profound, disturbing gamble. As you now drift into a deep, comforting sleep, let the distant sounds of ancient caravans and the imagined cries of the sick fade into the quiet background of history. You are safe in your own time, far removed from the brutal realities of ancient epidemics and their terrifying cures. May your dreams be peaceful, filled with the quiet certainty of modern medicine and the profound comfort of readily available, effective care, a stark contrast to the disturbing truth we've explored tonight. And now, good night, and have a sweet dream.